Okay, our guest today is executive trainer, strategic advisor, professor of communication, and published author, Ryan J. Warriner. I met Ryan through my daughter, Tiffany, who said, Dad, I have someone you have got to get on your podcast. She told me about you, and I said, yes, let's do it and share all you bring to the table with our listeners. And so here we are. Welcome, Ryan. Give us a quick intro rundown of who you are and what you do and where you are from and where you live now. How's that for a rundown?
Yeah, that's thanks, Mark. First of all, thanks for having me on. I
Of
really appreciate
course.
it. Yeah, I was looking forward to this conversation as well. Uh, Going back a little bit, so I'm Canadian. I was born in just south of Toronto, Canada. And yeah, right now I'm a professor at a Canadian university. And like you mentioned, I do a lot of things. I write books, I give speeches, I coach executives kind of in the corporate world as well. So I have a little like one foot in each in the academic and then also in the professional
Yeah.
realm. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to connecting those dots today as to, where I came from and where I am. And hopefully along the way, we can share some of the experience with your listeners.
That's awesome. So Toronto, I've been there one time. It's beautiful. I only had a quick in and out trip. I was at a client that lived there, and they had me come up to see their house. And I think I was there less than 24 hours. I think I flew in the morning, flew out in the evening, and kind of whizzed through downtown real quick. So I'd like to go back. I have a client there now. His name is Richard Waksberg. I don't know if you know Richard or not. He's an executive there in Toronto, an amazing guy. If you don't know him, I'm going to introduce you because you'll really enjoy meeting him. He's just a very talented, enterprising person. That's what I would say.
Oh, that'd be excellent. Just you already gave a tantalizing introduction description of
Oh yeah, you're gonna. There's only one Richard Waksberg in the world, and he's definitely it. So
it.
so anyway, we'll make that happen down the road. Do you ever come out to Arizona? You must, because you ran into Tiffany.
Yes, yeah, I usually come out there about 3, 4 times a year. Actually, I work out of the Empire Club there on
Okay.
occasion. So, and I've many friends in the area, so they're very grateful to have that many friends down there. They always it's like kind of like a small family. It's like a community. So we
It
go down
is
there.
very much so. I always tell people Phoenix is the biggest Mayberry. It's
Hmm.
like everybody knows everybody in this town. So,
Yeah, for sure. And the
well,
weather's
when you
great.
come out next time, I'd love to get together with you. And I know after we do this interview, I'm definitely going to want to get together with you. So I'm going to already suppose that this is going to happen. So
All right, I hope I live up to the expectations. I hope I live up to the hype.
we're right back at you. Okay, so let's tell us about your background and how you came to be in position where you could teach top tier executives how to be more confident, proficient leaders.
Yeah, that's a great question. I saw that on the question list. It's a really
Yep.
pretty deep. And my initial thought was from a young age, from a young age, let's say, I always knew I
You
wanted to.
still look young, my friend.
Thank you. It's only because I trimmed it down.
There you
When,
go.
when beard gets longer, the more gray
Oh
the.
yeah, I had the long beard last year, and everyone's like, "Man, you look so old," and I trimmed it. And they go, "Wow, you look so young." So it's kind of a nice little process.
Yeah, yeah. You trim it down. You think, you know what? I'm not that bad.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
no, but when I was younger, I kind of gravitated. Had a curiosity about how people learn. Basically, that's what it boils down to. I was always curious about how people came to their decisions and what
Right.
made two people who see the same event and wanted the same outcome approach in two different ways.
Completely different, right?
Yeah, that always kind of captivated me. I remember spending a lot of time thinking about it, and then when I kind of got into my nerdy phase and in my early teenage years, I was reading a lot about it, about psychological processing, interpretations, those types of things.
Yeah,
And my first step was out of school, I became a teacher because, how people learn and children need to
sure.
be taught. And so that was the first step. And, it's funny when I first thought, fast forward, when I first started coaching executives about 8 or 10 years ago, I thought to myself, I was like, I can't believe this is where I am. But, going back like to where I was when I started teaching children, it's I hate to say it, but it's very similar. The key to being what I found to being an effective teacher is the ability to get through to people, right? To
Right.
to have them listen and actually care about and
Understand.
value what you're sharing with them, right? Like
Right.
that's the key piece. And oftentimes, some executives, especially ones who've achieved a ton of success, are reluctant to just obey and take the advice from just anyone, right? Because they've
Right.
had achieved such a degree of success on their own. It's
Yeah,
harder
their
to find.
ego, their ego is way up here. And why is this guy trying to teach me?
Yes, and there's a portion of that for sure, and then
Yeah,
you combine that with, well, I've already achieved this much doing it my way. Why should
Right.
I, why do I need to change type of thing. So there's a lot of like compete, I don't want to say competing interests, but there's a lot of factors that form that personality. And that
Yes.
seems to be a common personality among many of the executives. So
Yes.
what I realized is that that's probably one of my greatest skills, my ability to connect with people and get them to see like I'm on your side. No, I don't know as much as you do in your industry because you're the industry expert, but I
Right.
do have some insights that'll help you accelerate your success and get to achieve the goals that you
Next
want to
level.
achieve.
Yeah. Sounds very interesting that you said everything you just said is something that I experience with my business as an architect because I'm dealing with CEOs and, top performing people. And here I am designing their house, and it's the same. I experience the same thing. It's like, look, I'm on your side here. I'm not going to tell you how to do your thing and how you want to live and everything. I'm going to try to extract how you want to live and how you want to amp it up to the next level and take that part of your life to the next level. That's virtually what you're doing with their business.
Yeah, exactly. And with themselves and with
Yeah.
everything as we try to do a holistic, they call it self-actualization, like reaching the absolute
Yeah.
pinnacle that you could achieve of yourself. But yeah, that's a great analogy for the same thing with houses. Yeah, how many times have you had to redo, I'm not sure if this should be here. I'm not sure you'd probably have to redo blueprints all the time.
Well, and the
And
thing is, I mean, a lot of them have 4 or 5 houses. So, to say now I'm going to design their sixth house and I know better than what's happened in their prior five, it's the same thing. It's very similar. And
yeah, I can
so, what
imagine.
I kind of like to do, what I love about where we're going here today is I love what you do, and I've had a lot of experience with that from a young age, actually. But I'd love to incorporate some of the things you're going to tell us today into the process of designing a home for them, just twisting that around and infusing it into what I do. Does that make sense?
Sure.
What
Yeah,
I like
let's
to do, what I like to do is I like to use the process of designing a home, not just to create a set of plans. I really want to do it to change the way a person lives in that house and change the way their whole life goes using my house as a vessel to augment what you do, Ryan.
mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Reinforce what you're telling them on your end. Let the house almost activate that in a way. That makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And I'm just, as you're speaking, I'm putting myself in your shoes and I'm thinking, yeah, you kind of sometimes have to be a step ahead of them and then you have to convince them that you're a step ahead of them or,
Right.
it can be, I can see that being a little bit of a challenge from time to time.
Yeah, because basically you're creating a roadmap, and then you're bringing them along on this roadmap.
Hmm.
And so I'm sure you see the same thing in what you do. So, but I
Yeah,
love just bringing all this together into daily life. This is what you teach them and what I provide in terms of what they live in. It all becomes this super, nova experience.
it really does. And to that point right there, we just touched on something. There are
Yeah,
so many executives and people that I've crossed paths with that they go through their life kind of on autopilot, right?
right.
They make
Most
decisions.
people, most people are on autopilot. That's what
Yeah.
I've noticed.
Yes, 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 yes. And oftentimes it's as I say it's hardwired in.
Right,
So it's difficult to change it and sometimes it's difficult to even people are reluctant to change, right? Like why would you change something unless you have to?
right.
So it takes a little bit of time actually to kind of peel back those layers and show them like you're making decisions on autopilot that are not aligned with your best interests.
Right.
And if we take some time to kind of sort through that and then we can course correct and
Yes.
really that's some of the best investment of time because
Yeah. No, I love that
yeah,
for
one
sure.
little pieces, course correcting this, course correcting that. Like you'd be amazed at how your lifestyle changes when you
Yeah,
start taking
exactly.
control.
No, it's one of the things that I've really loved watching happen. I'm sure I'm obviously you do the same thing. It's just people are on autopilot, and all of a sudden you just change a few inputs to their life, and man, it's like a huge awakening to them. And they're like, "Wow, I've been kind of like a zombie in my world, and I now all of a sudden now you give me these few little pieces, and it's a cone of vision on the football field for a quarterback, right?"
Yes, yes.
And all of a
That's
sudden they see the whole thing, and so versus just one receiver running one pattern.
well, that's exactly what it is. But when that's a great analogy too. But that's a great, yeah, that's exactly what
That's it.
happens. They get into their own life, and then they're
Yeah.
doing, and you
Well, it's
can't blame them.
easy.
It's human
It's
nature.
easy.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're doing one thing after. You're focusing on what you're doing next, not like you said, zooming out and looking and saying, "Why am I doing this next? Is this
Right.
actually going to benefit me, or am I just doing this
Right.
because it's Tuesday at 4 and this is what I always do at Tuesday at 4 type of thing?"
Exactly right. And
Hmm.
what I love then is just throwing those inputs. That's why I do these tours to Italy. I do tours to France. We got an amazing tour coming up in France. And what I love watching is, everyone goes to work are the same. Everyone's on this zombie robot way of living. And you get them on these tours, and it's just like a huge awakening. Their senses. People tell me about the second day of my trip, oh my God, my dreams. I haven't dreamt like this in years. I don't know what's going on. It's, well, you're eating a lot of mushrooms, but that's probably not it. But it's just you wake certain senses up, and all of a sudden, like I said, that cone of vision just expands, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And for in my line of work, usually the catalyst for that, let's say, is a well-crafted question
Right.
or framing something that they had a firm belief or a firm stance on. When you reframe it and you see that start to change, that's
Right.
usually the crack in the dam that's gonna,
Interesting.
the first sign everything's gonna unload.
That's interesting. Okay, that's very cool. So you can see I go off script quite a bit here, Ryan.
That's
So
okay. I'm
be
good with that.
prepared. So you recently earned your doctorate in education and have taught communication courses at McMaster University in Ontario, which is one of the top 100 universities in the world. Is it correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So tell us a little bit about that.
McMaster, so my university they're known for health science predominantly. It's actually got one of the number one children's hospital in Canada, and they do a number of like, great research studies there. They're constantly exploring and pushing the boundaries of health science, engineering, business. And one of the staples actually of McMaster University is, I shouldn't say staples. One thing that they're known for, they really hang their hat on, let's say, is they came up with problem-based learning, which is basically case studies. And they came up with this back in the 70s, and they really, pardon me, they really worked hard to implement it throughout. So just to give you some contrast, ordinarily we'd teach this is a problem and this is the method to solve it, and then the
Right.
students understand the method and they go forward and they use that approach for apply it to whatever. But with problem-based learning, they say, look, we had a problem here. We don't know the solution. So you're all bright students. You're all master's, PhD students. Best idea wins. Put in groups of three,
Right.
groups of four. Research, share experiences, use hypothetical or theories, whatever you can, and we'll try solutions. And that has really advanced a lot of the technologies in healthcare that we have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm hearing so much about AI, and we're using it quite a bit already in our business. And how is that having an influence on what you're doing?
Well, I'll tell you as a professor, and my TAs would be the first to tell you, it makes assessing a lot more challenging because for the students that submit their assignments. Because I teach, like you said, I teach communication skills. I teach oral
Right.
communication, business communication, presentation, those types of things. So, yeah, that's a challenge for that. And it's funny how, just quickly, because
Yeah.
some of the students, they're like, oh, we have all these AI programs now. Our presentations are going to be excellent. Not realizing that, it could make you the best slides in the world and
Right.
structure your presentation, but you still have to deliver it, right?
That's
And if someone who's reluctant to speak in front of people finally speaks in front of people, it's not usually the best result. But no, there's been some tremendous strides in AI, especially in like healthcare and engineering from at the university. And
yeah.
I speak for in all of college. I think what the future will be, and it's kind of scary, Mark. I was thinking about this the other day. They will be able to like the AI will be able to detect like masses and body abnormalities
Yeah.
months, if not or years before anything manifests, and they're going to be able to do it in fractions of a second and much more accurately than a human could. So it's,
Right.
when you start to think about the actual applications that AI could have in healthcare and in like long term, some of the stuff I see, I'm very fortunate. Some of the stuff I come across in my work, I'm like, wow, I didn't think that was
Yeah.
going to be possible in my lifetime.
All
But
right. It's happening so fast. That's what's so amazing. And I notice it in my industry and in business in creating, ideas. I'll have an idea and I want to create something quickly in AI and it generates it. And it's beautiful. It's not exactly what I would do, but it's close,
mm,
but what I notice is there's something that only Mark Candelaria would do in a certain way. And as good as AI is, it doesn't know what's going on back here in the
mhm.
back of my brain. That's something I would do a little different. So, and then like you said, I still have to present it. I still have to sell the idea to a client. I can't, you can't just here's a paper, good luck, enjoy it, you know.
Yeah, I know.
So like I said, there's a whole story behind the reason why we design or do something. It's not just here's a drawing. There's, this is why it's drawn like this, and this is what it's going to do for you and stuff like that. So I find it more as just another tool that just takes all that time that it usually takes me to put something on paper and compress it so I can spend more time delivering the story behind it. That makes sense.
Yeah, I find that as well, and I find for me personally, I just there's specific things I find it effective for. Like
Yeah.
if I'm working with a client who's in a different state or a different country, it's great at pulling all the legal jargon for the local state law or what have you, and preparing a contract, for example, or things of that nature. Those things great, but I do believe, especially in the world that's becoming more and more automated, more and more technology, less and less human. I believe that human part is more valuable. And you should, to your point, you should have a piece of yourself in all of
Yes.
your work.
Yes.
And you need to have that personal touch in there. It needs to have some meaning for you so that when you deliver it, it's not just something AI pumped out. It's something
Right.
maybe gave you the idea or gave you an outline, or maybe it gave you the whole thing and you tweaked it and you made it a little bit more comfortable for you, like any one of those, but you need to be in it.
Exactly. It's what I'm kind of feeling or seeing or experiencing is that AI is a machine and the human is still a soul.
Mhm. Yes.
And so it's like the machine can only produce so much and it can produce it amazing now, but it's lacking a soulfulness portion
Mhm.
or particle that only you can bring that part to that end result. And so I kind of think there's going to be a huge revolution in this whole soulfulness of who you are and what you bring and what you experience. And I think this will give you more time, to explore that part of who you are, because I'm not sitting there drawing a drawing for 4 hours. I got 3 hours now to understand why am I drawing it this way or why is the outcome this way. You know what I'm more thinking from a deeper level.
Absolutely. And we could all benefit from more of that. That's something I work with my executives and when I'm training corporate all the time is self-reflection and
Yeah.
self-assessment because you need to understand, you need to know yourself and you need to know like the situation you're going into and you need to really the deeper you think those through and you come to some firm like non-negotiables, like understandings about yourself,
Hmm.
you start to see the outcomes come your way. You're really your actions are changing even subconsciously towards those ends. And like people don't realize how powerful it is. This is not one of those woo woo, like, think positive and good things will come. This is like tangible because your body embodies it and it actually manifests in the real world into like outcomes that are more favorable for you.
I say that all the time. When Tiffany listens to this podcast, you go, Dad, that's exactly what you tell me all the time. And it's true. I mean, you create that energy around you and it draws associated energy that is benefiting towards your outcome, I think.
Oh, I've seen it. I've seen it so many times. It's for
Yeah.
me. I mean, when I was younger, I used to think that too. Like, oh, that's just something people say. But I've seen it because I've seen it manifest. One of the benefits. I get to work with a lot of companies, and in some of the corporate rooms, I'll tell you, I've seen people in the staff room and walking around the office that are like they're upbeat, they're smiling, or they're determined, they're friendly, they're respectful, and then you see some other people that are just they're focused, they're locked in, just doing what they and trying to kind of avoid people so that they can do more of their work, which
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that, but you could totally tell the two different mindsets and what's
Yeah.
going to happen. The person who's kind of like more happy, more positive out there talking with more people, those are the ones who they get to travel and represent the company. They get to become
Right.
ambassador. They get promoted quicker. All the
Yeah.
benefits come from those types of things, from the thought process because the thoughts, control your emotion. Or emotions control your thoughts, and then your thoughts control your actions. That's
Yeah.
typically how it works psychologically. Sorry, Mark. I know I'm kind of
No,
rambling
I
too
love
much.
this. This is exactly what I want.
Okay. So that's typically what happens, but I agree with you. And Tiffany should listen. It manifests
It
very
does.
very much tangibly.
Yeah, and pretty quickly, if you get good at it, I found it's like for some reason, the more you believe it, the more you exercise it, just like anything else, the better you get at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you a story that may dovetail into our next question or
Yeah,
the
go
direction
ahead.
you want to go next. But yeah, when I first started coaching executives, I coached because a friend of mine was raising some funds for his startup that he had. And I think they were in Series B or Series C at the time. So they had some success already, but he just wasn't feeling 100% confident and wanted some help to present and to pitch. and knew that that was kind of my expertise. My background's in communication and psychology. So that's something I excelled in, was helping people craft messages to influence others to do what you want. That's initially what I started doing, was a lot of communication coaching, pitch coaching, those types of things before I graduated, say graduated, but escalated, let's say, and transformed to executive coaching. But anyways, in those regards, the people that I were coaching were very much like, they were constantly trying to focus on what they were saying and what they were doing, and not so much what other people needed to hear, which
Right.
was a kind of an issue. But through them, what I noticed was a lot of them wanted to just kind of work individually, one on one. They weren't very outward oriented. And as such, I didn't really go to many events early on. I just
Hmm.
worked with individuals through referrals, and that was pretty much it. Then, a couple years later, I started attending these conferences and going to these events. I can't remember how it started, but one thing led to another. And next thing you know, at these events and these conferences, I'm getting calls and emails like crazy. And before then, I only worked through referrals. So I did like two or three clients a year. That was it. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I had like 35 clients the next year. And it was simply, I wasn't doing any outward marketing or anything. It was just because I was being there in person talking to people,
Yep.
and that's what they want. They don't
Yeah.
want, like, they would prefer that over a phone call or over a
Right.
text or an email. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. I preach that all the time to my team. It's like, get in front of people. That, to me, emails are the laziest form of communication. I know it takes time to write an email and everything, but I tell people, I could have picked up the phone and solved this in 2 seconds. And you're on
Yes,
your 30th email to solve a 2-second phone call. This is stupid.
completely
And
agreed.
and so it's like, use and there's so much that happens in a person's voice and inflection and a communication and a trust that builds. I mean, it's just a completely different form of communication and much more effective than an email. I mean, email is great to document with the outcome, but don't make it the impetus of your form of communication. I think a phone call is, or in person, is 10 times better.
Oh, it's 10 times better. It's probably more than that, but like, you're right. The connection that people build, again, a lot of these things that we're talking about, we know you and I are of the same mind. So we know they're extremely valuable, but
Yeah,
just sometimes because they're not immediately tangible, there's not an instant ROI that you can put your finger on. There's not like a number, that
right,
oftentimes they go overlooked or they go kind of ignored. And it's
right.
unfortunate because the people who realize that, like, those are the people who win the day, right?
Yeah,
Like, right when I had that moment where I was like, after come home from a conference, and I got off the plane and I had three voicemails and an email. I'm like, what is going on here? And then I think to myself, why didn't I do this 2 years ago? Like, I should have started. But you scratch your head, and it's just for you listeners out there, just getting in front of people and you showcasing your own personal brand, because
hmm,
everyone has their own personal brand, right?
yep,
And when they get in front of you and they speak with you and they start to connect with you and they know Mark, then
yep,
that's it. You're like, Mark, you're their go-to guy. You need something
exactly.
designed, go to Mark. Mark does
Yeah,
great quality work. He's really
yeah.
good. Like, that's exactly what the reputation becomes.
Right. And people always, ask me, how do you go to so many events and how do you do all this? And it's because of that reason. It's like I want to be out, and I want me to be out there instead of someone else being in that spot, because then they remember that I was there, so it's everything you just said.
Yes,
So it
absolutely.
takes time and effort, but if you start doing it a lot, you get used to it, and you just, it's part of your MO, it's just how you do things.
Absolutely. Yes. And for those of you in offices, or for those of you in real estate, wherever you work, like, those getting in front of even, like, neighbors and friends and whoever,
Yeah.
like, it's just getting out there. And I know some people it burns their energy. Mark, I don't know if you can tell about me already, but I'm one of the people who enjoy speaking with people, so it gives me a
Yeah.
little more energy.
That's
But
the
wherever
same.
you stand on the spectrum, if
Yeah.
you make an effort, just it's a little bit makes a huge difference.
Exactly, for sure. So your website, which I love, by the way, now that I know it, I love your YouTube stuff. That was very
Thank
good.
you.
So, your website states your mission is to help professionals everywhere gain confidence, maximize their impact, and unlock their fullest potential. Tell our listeners all the benefits someone can gain from using your services, and do they work with you directly, or do you have a whole team, or how do you go about doing what you do, Ryan?
All right, I'll answer those in reverse order, but thank you for
Okay.
the question. So yeah, I have I have a team, a few. a few people on social media, and I have a few assistants that do my scheduling and my booking and things like that. But no, I'm the one who does the coaching and the training specifically. There's no one else. There's only one Ryan. I try to
Yep.
tell people. Some people say thank the Lord for that, but anyhow, yeah. So it's me that does it with regard to the coaching and the training. It's usually so training is usually small groups, usually like 25, between 10 to 25 people, and it's on a focused theme or topic somewhere they need to improve, whether it's leadership or conflict resolution, or sometimes it is presentation skills. I still do a little bit of that, those types of things, fundraising for startups, for example. And when it comes to executives, usually some of the services that I help them with kind of depends on what they're struggling with, because
Right.
it's typically not them. It's well, maybe a little bit more common now, but it's usually someone else will have sent them to me. Or like, let's for example say the CEO will send me three of their VPs and say,
Right.
I need this person has to be more effective, more efficient. This person needs people skills because their team's starting to mutiny on them, and this person needs, whatever booth training because we're going to be sending them to a ton of conferences and they need to be better in
Yep.
booths. So
Yep.
depending on what the needs are, and I mean that's just what the information I get going in. Once I start speaking with them and I'm able to diagnose a little bit of where they are, and then sometimes what the actual issue is not necessarily what the manager, whomever brought me in, is looking for. So there's some adjustments that go along the way, but ultimately it comes down to helping enrich their perspective and helping them to see beyond not just like this week, this month, and not even in terms of time, but just more in terms of space, like where you are, like metaphorically in your
Right.
life, in your career, right? Like, and what do you want? Because in order to determine, once you determine where you want to go, we can help identify the skills that will help you to get there. And then we can either start to develop those skills or enhance those skills or what have you. But those are typical things. It's a process because it's people. It's not,
Right.
unfortunately, it's not like computers. It's not just like you send the code in and it goes. Sometimes some people take off right away and they're very eager to learn and excited to improve. And then other people, as we discussed, are a little bit reluctant. And those are take a little bit longer. But once you get through, the curve expedites pretty quickly. So
Interesting.
that's one of the things I love about my job is working with different people, because even though it can be challenging, it's a challenge that I love because I'm learning when I'm doing it. I'm learning something new
Sure.
about someone. And
Yep.
I learned that's a mistake I learned early on in my career. No two people are alike. You think to
No.
yourself, "Oh, I had a case like this before." No, you didn't. You thought you did, but
Yeah.
this is different. So,
Everyone is a little bit unique. So in terms of, so I'm just thinking in terms of my team and how I would integrate your services with the people that I've got in my team. We've done some similar things with an organization called MAPS, where we send people to it's basically like a 3 or 4 day workshop that is on team building, goal setting, all those kind of things. You usually send 2 or 3 people at one shot, and they always come back pretty fired up. It's been pretty effective. But I love this approach that you're describing. Like I've got a partner that we just brought on, and I'd really like to start pushing him to the next level in terms of all the things you said, connecting with people, getting out there,
mm,
doing more things, and just sharpening his skill set to really take what he currently has to the next level. To do that, do you do a lot of investigative work, or I don't know the right word, give me some background on you so that you can prepare what you do in a more effective manner, or you just get in and start talking to them and do it as you go.
that's a great question. So I call it, I would call it like I do like a diagnostic session. That's like the
Diagnostic, there you go.
official term that I use. I
Yep.
know as I meant by investigative, the same thing basically. But what I do is like I said, I have a list of questions that I ask, and then during a conversation, I'll find out the key information that we need to go forward. Like, for example, usually there's a reason why they're not, for example, in your situation, where you'd like them to be, performing at the level where they achieve the success on the consistency or of whatever magnitude. And
Right.
once we figure out why that's not happening, then we can start to bridge those gaps. Then we can start to build those connections. Because sometimes it could be something different, right? Sometimes it's no, the person sees, but they just don't believe it'll work. Or it's like, no, they don't see it at all. Like they see the problem they differently, right? They see,
Mhm.
you see a car and they just see, four wheels and an object in their way, for example.
Right. So what does your process look like? You kind of describe, you're starting to get into it a little bit. I mean, you do, like, for instance, would you fly out here to Arizona and meet with my team and go through things as like a, is it like a 3 day work? Do you have set packages, or kind of describe how that all works?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So, because no one, I'm just gonna go off on a tangent for quickly, but yeah,
Yeah.
I never saw myself as a coach and a trainer at first. I just saw myself as, right, someone who was, 15 years ago, just helping out a friend, and just kind of doing some work. And then when you realize
Mentorship.
you got to start okay, yeah, you got clients, you got a business, you got all these things, and over the years, there's been an evolution. You start thinking, yeah, like, do I need to come up with packages, or what's the best way to do it? And with individuals, typically what I do is I will meet with them one on one first, and then I'll meet with them in a group. Let's say it's four people. So I'll meet with them in a group and they're working together, and I'll talk to them in a group and get a sense of the projects they work on, and it kind of helps me understand what that dynamic is like. And
Mhm.
then I speak with them individually, and then after that, I'm able to craft a kind of a plan for them, if you will, like if you want to say a roadmap of
Right.
where they are, and then where they're going to end up in 8 weeks and 12 weeks, however long the coaching sessions are for, and then we reevaluate. And then along the way, there's milestones. So, for example, if you want someone to be able to, say, be a better salesperson and close more sales, for example, well, maybe the first milestone or a milestone along the way will be making more calls, or putting themselves in front of more people, going to more events, logging more in the, excuse me, in the tracking sheet. And then
Yep.
after that, then the next step is the next thing. So those are really carefully crafted to give us the metrics we need to get to where we want to go. And then, yeah, for the group training, that's usually if someone, the company needs, like I said, they have an event coming up, or if they realize that their meetings are just dragging, or there's friction in their meetings and things like that. So I get brought in to help people to communicate more effectively, smooth things over. And really, when it comes to executives, a lot of the hard work, the heavy lifting is the perspective shifting, I'll be honest with
Huh. Yeah. What do you mean by perspective shifting?
you. I mean, they typically have an idea of how things work,
Are. Yeah.
and how things should work according to them.
Yep.
And they often are overlooking some components, such as the what the company thinks, or what the direction the company wants to go in. The culture, maybe the company's just been through something, so the pulse of what else is happening.
Mhm.
The connection with their peers and with other people is usually overlooked too. And by the way, these aren't anything like, they're not like character flaws. It's more like human nature. Like we said, when people are used to executing and getting like a star performer, and now you're leading a team, it's a different skill set, right?
Yeah.
It's like the cello player in an orchestra now has got to be the conductor, right? Well,
Yeah.
he's not used to getting everyone to play together at first. He's like, I'm waving this. Why aren't you guys doing it? So
Right.
like that's one of the challenges that happens. But with the perspective shifting, it can be a process. It can take time. But once we start to kind of enrich that, and factor in more potential factors in the equation, and start to make more considerations, the decision making becomes, it starts to shift. You'll see it, and then the actions start to shift, and then sometimes it's even subconscious, unbeknownst to them.
Right.
They'll say, "Yeah, Ryan, you're not going to believe what happened." I'm like, "Oh, what's going on?" Yeah, well, actually, I just got asked to fly to this huge conference and represent the company, and like I didn't even think I was on their radar. And this is after 2 months, let's say, of
Yep.
changing your behavior, changing your interpersonal skills, and honestly making decisions that are more, like I said, aligned with what you want and what the company wants, than before you would just do something because it was part of the routine.
Right, right. Yeah, I definitely noticed that. And then that's the one of the things I really want to try to start doing, elevating some of the people in my organization, just to make them aware that their potential is much greater than they just think it is. And they have the opportunities, there's so many more opportunities for them to grow that they're even not even aware of. And a lot of it is just getting involved, you know?
Absolutely. A lot of people, and that's something I found too, it kind of applies in all areas of life, but people are very quick to discount themselves.
Right. It's so crazy. I can't believe it sometimes. I go, you don't realize how talented you are. I mean, we've got a lot of people that have got master's degrees in architecture, have been working with me for 8 years, and are afraid to take the architect's exam. It's like, or they're too busy to take it. You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
gotcha.
Oh, you've
Yeah.
got me too busy. I can't take my architect's exam. and it's just like, go get it done. You'll pass it in 2 seconds. And then it's like the Wizard of Oz with the Scarecrow. When you give the Scarecrow his degree, he's like the smartest person in the world. He always was the smartest person, but you just gave him a piece of paper,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and that is so true. I mean, our world has plenty of examples. The most successful people in the world, like Elon Musk, dropped out of school.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's Zuckerberg too. Like so, it's not uncommon. It's well known, but yet people, I don't know what it is. They have such self-doubt. A lot of that is from childhood, or that's been hardwired that if I try
Mhm.
something, I'm going to fail.
Right.
So
The
then
fear of
I,
failure, not that they have to deal with it, but they're gonna be seen as a failure by other
yeah,
people. Right?
reputation. Yes, that
Yeah.
is a big thing, and that's especially in front of people. When we talk about glossophobia, which is like the fear of public speaking,
Hmm.
often it's not the fear of the people per se. It's the fear of your reputation could get damaged, right? Because it's evolutionary. So it comes from many, many years ago when if we were outnumbered, one of our ancestors was outnumbered by another tribe or something, they might be in
Right.
danger, right?
Right.
So they might be vulnerable. They need to get out of there. And that's still kind of in our
That
DNA.
DNA is in there, right?
That's right. So that's why it happens, and it's much of the same. But it's funny. I'll kind of go on another, like, tell you an
Yeah,
experience. But
go
I
for it.
worked. So I worked with this company in San Francisco recently, a few months back, and during the training, everything went great. Did some corporate training there for fundraising, and then afterwards, a few of the people in the organization they took me to dinner, and we were talking, and eventually it ended up with the managing director and myself, and told me said, "Do you want to know what the secret to success is? The successful people versus the unsuccessful people, or people who don't quite reach their potential?" And of course, me, that's like, my bread and butter. So I'm like, "Yes,
Right.
please tell me,
Tell me.
wildly successful person, what you think." And they said the successful people in the world, they take on challenges not knowing how they're going to complete them, and they figure it out, and then they move on to the next one.
Yeah.
He said that the people who don't achieve their potential, he's like, are people who don't take the challenge because they think they can't do it.
Yeah.
And I
The other
thought,
thing I notice with that a lot of times is I'll see people that will want to take on the challenge, and they'll sit there and plan and try to, figure out what they're going to do, but never pull the trigger.
yeah,
And then there's others that will take on the challenge, they'll get started, they'll shoot the arrow, and then they'll guide the arrow along the way to the target. And
yep,
I just see so many people that never pull the arrow back. They never let it go. It's like, just shoot the darn thing, you
yep,
know?
I agree. And when I'm giving my speeches, I love that analogy. I use golf. I'm like, you
Okay.
can take as many practice swings as you want, but you got to actually hit the ball to
Yeah,
make
I like
progress,
that one.
right? Like
Yeah.
you got to hit the ball. If you don't hit the ball, you're not making. And yes, you might go out and you got to course correct and hit it back on, but that's
Yep.
life, right?
Yep.
And yeah, I was talking with someone the other day, one of my clients. I said the world needs to hear more. People need to know that when you screw up or if you make a mistake, hey, credit yourself for trying, and
Yeah.
then learn from it and improve, and go
Yep.
to the next.
Yeah, and
Because
just keep moving. I mean, as soon as you move, and that's the other thing that I've learned is, as much as you think people are judging you or you're saying, "Oh, he's a failure," you know what? They're worried about themselves being judged in a failure more than they're actually worried about you being judged in a failure. And everyone thinks everyone's thinking about me. Well, the fact is, they're really not thinking about you that much. So just move on. Just get on to the next thing. And it's like the news. A day later, no one remembers what the news was the day before,
ah, so true. It's
right?
it's it's so true.
It's like, just who cares? Don't worry about it. Just go play golf. Go enjoy the whole course versus
Yes.
taking practice swings on the driving range.
Yes. And I think, and to be honest, that's something I learned about when we're younger, we think that everyone is like, everyone thinks the same. I think this, so why doesn't this person think this? And
Right.
you get older and you start to realize, wow, people think, have different thought processes. But I was always like that. I want to know what my limitations are. Like,
Right.
I was always just curious to know. So I'd be the person who'd try something. Like, growing up in Canada, we had tons of snow and we'd go
Yep.
tobogganing and downhill in our little, and people be like, "Oh, I don't know if we can do this." I'll be like, "Oh, I'll try it and see if we can." From a young age, I was always
Go.
had that. Well, I want to figure out if I could do it or not, right?
Oh,
But there's so many people, like you said, who just and you know what? Because they turn down those opportunities or they avoid them, those folks are the ones that kind of get stuck and they get a little bit stagnated. And then
yep.
what happens next? What I've seen, unfortunately, in human behavior is then they start to blame. other things, right?
else. Yeah.
Oh, it's the economy, or
Yeah.
it's the job, or it's the time of year, or it's the play, whatever it is. And it's unfortunate because then if you think that, then we're never going to be able to make any progress, right? Like we need
Right.
to change that thought first in
Yep.
order to put yourself in better situations.
Yep. Exactly. I don't, complaining to me is just a lazy person's way of not doing anything, like do something about it then if it's such a problem, but
Yeah,
most people, it's easier just to sit and complain.
that's so true. That's so
Yeah.
true.
So in terms of your packages, I mean, I'm really curious what, in terms of your makeup of group, I'll call it group therapy or group training versus individual therapy or individual training. What's your breakdown? I mean, how much do you do of each?
So I do about, I would say 30% is group training and group events.
Okay.
And then probably like 70% in terms of coaching and training. And then about 70% is one-on-one
Wow,
executive
that's
coaching.
that's that's a complete opposite of what I thought it would be.
Yeah, I know, because you know why? Because I'll do a training session. For example, a little while back, I was in Denver and I did a group training session for presentation skills. This company was really getting frustrated that they would have these meetings and someone would present an update and no one would understand, okay, what do I need
Ah,
to do with this information? How does this help? So it's kind of funny. I'll tell you, Mark, some of the calls I get, and when they tell me, "Okay, we're having a problem. We just suck at speaking, or we just our teams are just fighting all the time. Can we get the? I don't. We don't want to retrain people and rehire people. Can you just come in and see what you can do?" Like those are the types of calls I get sometimes. It makes me laugh. But yeah, typically what happens is I'll do a training session, and then at the end of the training session, usually the more senior person in the room will pull me aside or ask to speak with me, and they'll say, "Yeah, Ryan, I got three that can you work with them on?" And so it typically goes like that a lot of the times, and then from there it just kind of spirals
so
out, or what do you want to say,
goes from there.
ripple effect out. Yeah.
Yeah. So what clients and services have you found that you enjoy most?
I'll tell you, I thought it was going to be leadership, but it's not. I don't mind leadership, but I kind of, when it comes to leadership, it can be a little bit more intense and a little bit more challenging. The types of training that I really like to do is pitching and fundraising. I find that a lot of fun.
Hmm,
Even like
interesting.
I said, 13 or 14 years later, I still love doing that. There's something about helping founders who are, they're very eager and they're fresh out there, and then when you get funding for them, that they help them get funding rather, and then they can start to build what they take it to the next level. It's a lot of gratification.
Oh, I
Um,
bet.
yeah, so I do enjoy doing that. That's one of my favorites. And then also the team cohesiveness training never gets old. The conflict resolution stuff, that's always enjoyable for me. I have a lot of fun while I'm training. I don't know if you could tell by my
Yeah,
personality,
no,
but
that's good.
yeah, it really makes me happy, and I love it. So I get to be in front of them and help come up with examples for them that bring it to life and that help give them like applicable tools. And I'll tell you, that's something that frustrated me when I was younger. And I go to these corporate training sessions because I wanted to know, okay, like what's it supposed to be like? Because remember, I came
Right,
from education, so I had no point of reference as to what a corporate training was. So I,
right,
I started to attend. I attended about 10 or 12, and after the 12th one, I was like, I can't keep sitting through these. These are just very formulaic, very dry, very like repetitive, and given
right.
by people who kind of had like no energy. It was just kind of like, okay, we're here for our training. We have to do PD every year. Let's get this over with type of thing.
Yeah,
So I kind of bring a different vibe, as if you can't tell, like I said, it makes me really happy. So I love doing that. And then always the communication, the communication training and coaching, interpersonal skills is great. It applies to sales, it applies to customer success or customer experience. That's a lot of fun too. When you
yeah.
kind of give people the phrases and the tools, like, well, what if they say this though, right? And they're because in their mind they have these what if
Preconceived
situations.
notions. Yeah,
Yes. And then that kind of prevents them from even getting the ball rolling because they don't want to
right.
run into that, right?
Yep.
But when you give them some tools, even if, I've had some crazy ones, Mark, where they're like, but what if they ask me, and it's something like they'll never ask. What if they ask me about unicorns or something, right? But it's never going to happen. But once you give them a response that they like, yeah, I could say that. That's a good one. Then they have no problem opening up conversations
Right.
with anyone, right?
Yeah, 'cause
Even if it
they
doesn't
know the
arise.
unicorn question. If it comes, they're ready for it.
Yes, that's right. And oftentimes it doesn't come, but just
Right.
the fact that you give them that, right? I find that, seeing the looks on their faces
Confidence.
and really, yeah, equipping them with the tools. That's what I say a lot. It's you equip them with the tools, and then you show them, demonstrate to them how they're most effective, how to use them. And then when they go out and use them, it's like makes you proud. You know,
Right.
it makes you feel like you're kind of you succeeded too. Like you get a piece of that kind of
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly. Have you done much work with architects or interior design firms or anything like that?
You know what? I've done some work with design firms. I find they're an interesting group of people to work with.
Huh?
I haven't done much with architecture, but I have to tell you, I don't know if I mentioned this before. It's kind of funny because my father, God rest him, passed away a few years back. But his name was Mark as well, and he was also in construction, but he was a contractor. So
Okay.
he built the homes that you design.
Yeah.
So I've
Yep.
always had kind of a soft spot for that in my
For
heart. And
that
I always,
part.
when I was a kid, he used to take me to the job sites and put a little helmet on me and make me help him inspect things and check
That's
things. And
cool.
so yeah, I got a lot of good memories around that.
Yeah, good. Well, we're going to get you in. I mean, I've got some ideas already brewing here, so I definitely want you to come and meet our group and talk, and because I just love the positive nature of everything you're saying here. And there are people in our office that kind of just come to work, and I've got a good crew, but there's some that are very enterprising and energizing, and there's others that just like you said, they kind of come in, sit down, get to work, get up, go home, and leave, and it's like you know I'd love to get everyone in sync with this energy flow and
Hmm.
just kind of watch what it does for the whole organization and just for the people themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, and I totally agree with that. That's something that, some people don't think about when they start a business, but see, you're got some experience, some wisdom there behind those glasses. So you know what it can do and the power of it.
Oh yeah, I've seen it for sure. So give me some um give me some tools that we can use in our daily routines, just daily life, whether it's private life or work life. What are some tips that you could share with us? Just real quick anecdotes for everybody.
Sure. I'm normally I normally don't have one in the can ready to go, but I actually do have one for this. Number one thing that I tell people if I don't have a lot of time to work with them, and they say,
Yep.
Ryan, like if I'm at an event and I'm on my way out or after I spoke, and they'll say, what can I do? I tell people the best thing you can do to move the needle the most is self-reflect and get into the practice of self-reflecting. I do it personally before bed and sometimes
Yep.
first thing in the morning
Yep.
before I sleep. But you close your eyes for me and you reflect back on the experiences you had that day. And oftentimes, if they're in the middle of the day and other things have happened, then when you go back and look at them, you look at them with fresh eyes.
Right.
And you're looking at them and maybe you're recognizing, you're considering a factor you hadn't considered before. Maybe, oh, someone was in the room. And when you had this conversation, person C was in the room when you had the conversation with people A and B, and maybe why they said something that you didn't expect them to say, it's because someone else was there, not because that's how they actually felt, right? Like those types of things that they help to kind of iron out and help clarify the events of the day for you. And once you
Yes.
have that, it's kind of like, screening your data to make sure you have more accurate data to work with. And
Right.
it's amazing what your mind is capable of. And I tell people back to the self-doubt that people have. Your mind is capable of parsing out data, of picking up tendencies, of building confidence, all of this subconsciously. Right? But a lot of
Yeah.
people don't trust themselves to do it. But self-reflection is so important because it helps you learn about your tendencies and your habits and things that you excel at and things that you don't. And sometimes even if you're able to do it on your own, I mean, kudos, power to you, you can do it. Is being able to kind of spot your blind spots. You know what? Like
Right.
I'm really, I get emotional in these situations sometimes, and I don't think clearly, and so I can't really trust what I thought of this exchange, right? For example, we'll leave that one, unturned for now, and I'll go with the rest that I have. It takes some wisdom to do that, but if you could do that, man, you should really start turning around your outcomes, and you really start seeing that you're making decisions now and you're taking actions now that you wouldn't have taken before if you didn't reflect and you just,
Uh,
went through your life.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can tell I love analogies. So it's like the football game is one part of the whole picture. It's then what you do with the film of the game of that game that you
Absolutely.
learn from that for the next game, right? And
Yes.
it takes the time to look at the film. It's like what you said, that inflection is so important to just take time and go, okay, this is that situation today. How could I have done that a little different? Or what I like to do, what I've learned to do is I have a situation coming up and I just scenario play. If I answer this way, what will happen? If I answer this way, versus just doing the answer right away and getting it off my checklist. It's like I take some time to think, if I do it this way, how will that affect not only that person, but maybe three other people that I'm not even thinking of that might be involved in the situation, you know? And what's going to be the win-win if I do it a certain way? And I've learned is to take a little more time to assess those things before just reacting, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you just articulated there, that's I would call that the next step. That you're like a step beyond
Yeah,
because you're able to when you're kind of like wargaming it or you're strategizing it out when you're thinking if they move here, I'll move there, like chess,
right,
then you have to have that mindset that
yeah,
I'm going to overcome or I'm going to adapt or I'm going to
right,
improvise. If you have that mindset of, oh no, they're going to say this and then like game over, right?
right.
Then it's kind of it's a self-defeating exercise, right? So
Yeah,
with some of the people that I work with, some of the executives, we go back to that step one and we really need to install that. I mean, they call it like a growth mindset, but basically not a fixed mindset. Not like I'm not good at this and I'm never going to be good at this, right?
yeah,
That's really hindering. And when you do the self-reflection, the whole purpose of it is to understand you more, to understand other people, your interactions more. And when you start to do that habitually, if you make that part of your routine, I promise you, you will see so many more favorable outcomes because
yeah,
even subconsciously, like I said, you're course correcting, you're changing things, and
yeah.
those manifest into other things. And that's basically how success happens.
I totally could not agree more with you, just based on my life. I've learned so much of the things you're saying have really helped me. And then there's obviously it's one of those things, like I said, the cone of vision on the field. You get so far, and then there's the next step of a bigger cone of vision. It just keeps growing, it
Yeah.
never ends. You're never going to get to the point where you think you know it all. Have, thank God. Uh, so speaking of God, what about spirituality? How does that interplay into your role of teachings at all?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that question before, to be honest with you. Um, so my parents are well, one of my on my mother's side I'm Italian, so I was born
Okay.
Roman Catholic, as
Yeah.
they say, and but I have not. I wouldn't say I'm like not practicing. Spirituality doesn't is not directly involved in my work too much, except to the degree that you need to. I would encourage people to have faith that there's a higher power, that there's
Right.
there's things out that are working, and call it whatever you will, but it's kind of just I guess a part of the belief that we can improve and that things are happening without our knowledge, like behind the scenes. And
Yeah.
that's what I tell people too. Like when I do sales training, some people think that if they don't close the sale that day, it's a failure, right? It's
Right.
success or it's failure. And I have to kind of help them to understand that no, no, no. Sometimes it takes more than one swings of the axe to chop the tree down, but other times I said you're just building your reputation, like we spoke about earlier.
Yep.
And then when they talk to their neighbors, they talk to their colleagues, then all of a sudden you get three sales out of
Yeah.
the first that was a non, right?
Yeah.
And so those types of things, and those happen like in the background afterwards. And if you don't have the kind of, I guess the word would be belief or the
Right.
faith
Right.
that
Faith.
faith or the belief that things will work like that, that if you
Yep.
continue to behave in this manner, that
Right.
things will start to gravitate towards you. Because I mean, that's another way to look at it, if you want to say.
Yeah. And the thing I've learned with all of that too, it's like you just said, you might not close that sale that day, but it's an opportunity to plant a seed that maybe 5 years from now they go, oh, we didn't hire you for that project, Mark, but now we just bought a property in northern Arizona, want to do a guest house,
Absolutely.
then I get that
Absolutely.
job. And so I've learned that even though I might not succeed on that given day, I'm making sure I'm planting a lot of seeds around that opportunity that might come to fruition down the road. And the more you do, it's like Johnny Appleseed, you just start planting seeds everywhere. Well, guess what? They start popping up everywhere every day. It's like,
Yeah.
well, how'd that happen? Well, let me tell you, I planted that seed 20 years ago and finally grew.
You know what? Yes, 100%, Mark. And people need to really, please rewind this, you listeners, and rewind this. Listen how old I am. Please go back and watch this again. Listen to this part again because it's so true. And people they don't act on it. But this is one
Wow.
of the biggest things. Is that when I was younger, I didn't believe it either, or I shouldn't say I didn't believe it, but I really questioned it. I had my doubts. But that's how things work. That's why now all of a sudden I have three assistants taking calls from me because
Right.
when you go out there and you start to talk to people and like you said, they know you and they know your work. And then even if they don't buy from you, they're at the office and they're like, I need a new house designed. I got a second
Yeah.
one. It's going to go in the Hamptons. Like, I'm not sure where. and they say, "Oh, well, I got a great guy for you." You know, I didn't use him because at the time, you know, we had like a
Right.
whatever issue, but you know, I mean, he did great plans. I'd be happy to connect you with him. Like those things happen
Happens all the time. It
all the
happens all
time.
the time. Yes.
And people
And
will
it's
always hire someone or make a call to someone through a referral,
right.
then go blind, find someone online, or they just so much more reluctant to.
Well, it's just one of those lessons that now, I'm 64. I've learned that lesson. When I was 22, you're thinking, what the hell am I planting all these seeds for? Nothing's happening.
Yes.
Now 64, they're all, they're everywhere. And so
Yes.
one of the things as a young person, I think a lot of things might not be happening immediately, but boy, just be out there planting the seeds and meeting people and doing all you can because it will come back. I mean, I'm still in contact with people. I joined a networking group when I was like 23, and I'm like, people are asking, what are you doing in that group? It's a bunch of old people.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I'm still in contact with a lot of them, or I'm in contact with their kids now. And it was, something that took 40 years to mature. But man, it's amazing what all the relationships that came from that group that I was in when I was 23.
Absolutely. And it happens all the time. They say that one of the biggest benefits of an MBA isn't necessarily the knowledge, it's the network
The
that you
network.
you come out with because you have shared experiences with these individuals. You know, you kind of have a bond now.
Uh,
And when they go out, everyone spider webs into their own path. Like there's a lot of opportunities for that in your line of work. I can
yeah,
just imagine, like, you know, your houses, they stand the test of time. So
right.
if someone likes a house and they're going to ask, where'd you get this design from? Oh, I'd love something that's backlit like this. Where'd you get this
Yeah,
from? And that's going to come back to you. And for your employees or for the sales folks out there and the agents and whoever are out there on
yeah,
your behalf, they should know too that their name is going to be tied to that, right? Like,
yeah.
oh, I
Like,
had the best guy and he's great. I'm not sure if he's still there, but let me see if I can reach out to him, right? These
right.
things happen. Like I said, it's very common.
Yeah, for sure. So you've also written and published multiple books along the way. Tell us about these books and what have motivated you to write them.
Yeah, thanks. So the first book that I published, or I shouldn't say I published, first book I wrote because I have a publisher in England, is The Effective Presenter, and it's a business communication book. And the impetus for that was I just had simply had a lot of demand for presentation, for pitch coaching and training, public speaking, basically like persuasive communication,
Yeah.
and I couldn't be everywhere at once. So it was a little before the pandemic happened, and I just, you know, finally got enough people bugging me to said, okay, I'll sit down and I'll put some of this on paper. So the book actually outlines a framework and it helps you from soup to nuts. Start with how do I begin a presentation in terms of what identifying what a win looks like for me and who my
Right.
audience is and how do I find out about them and that information I find out about them, how does that help me integrate and build a presentation that they'll like and that'll achieve my outcomes. So it starts from there all the way to the end, all the way to anxiety reduction strategies and structuring it, everything in between, slide design. Um,
Awesome.
so that's, yeah, that's really, that was my big book. And I'm actually working on a second book at the moment that's more on self-improvement, self-actualization. I have a couple collaborators, but I'm in the midst of that. And between then and now, I've authored two textbooks, university level textbooks for advanced speaking and listening skills and advanced note-taking strategies, because that's a skill too. I mean, hopefully with AI, it'll be, you know, that'll help as well. But you know, it's so many people, so many executives, they go to meetings and they wouldn't really, the notes would be scant or the notes would be just everything that was said. And then it's like, okay, how do you parse out what's valuable for you and what you need to
Right.
do and what you not need to do? And people have, it is a skill to be able to listen and detect what the
Yes.
important information is and what should I do with this information. And unfortunately, it's not taught as much as it should be.
Right. And it's funny, I teach my team. It's like don't only write what your notes what they said. Also pay attention to what they didn't say.
Good point.
What are the options that they did not choose? Or like if you gave them two options and they didn't choose one of them, make a note of the fact that you gave them that option, but they didn't choose it. Because then later they go, well, how come no one ever showed me this option? Well, we actually did, and you told us you did not want that option. So there's a lot of things like that where I find note taking is absolutely critical. And like you said, then extract the important action items from those notes so that you work it effectively immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of for you and for your team, I would definitely recommend for when you're speaking with clients
Yeah.
because there's a lot of different components of a home. And
Oh.
you'll be able to find out if you know how to ask the questions and you know how
Right.
to like actively listen, you can find
Yes.
out what's most important to them and
Yes.
what is not a huge deal,
Important.
right?
Exactly.
And then you
Yep.
can focus your efforts to achieve a, higher return.
Yeah, because it's totally different for every single person. You
Absolutely.
assume that everyone's the same, and nothing could be more further than the truth. Is that people are so different, and how they live. And that's one of the fun things that I've enjoyed about what I do is it's amazing how different people live, what their daily routines are. And oh my God, it's just crazy. So it's
Oh,
kind of fun.
I can imagine because sorry, I just want to just quickly, I'm
Yeah.
just putting myself in your world. A friend of mine, I remember like they had a brand new house built this probably 4 or 5 years ago, and they like if it was for their parents, they had it built for their parents. And I remember the everything, it looked like just an average house, looking like a normal house, but the bathroom was the shower had like four different shower heads in it, and it was just I'm like, what is happening here? And they said, yeah, my dad wanted a really huge shower that he could walk around in and that he could
Yeah, but everybody's different.
I never would have thought that, but yeah, I guess like you said, and if you don't have that conversation, you're not going to know, right?
You won't know. So we have a lot of conversations because you got to get it right. So anyway, I love this whole chapter. I think one of the first books I read when I was young was Think and Grow Rich when I was
Oh,
like 10 years old. And I still read it every now and then just as a refresher because it's such a great book. um, and all those things. My dad and mom were involved in a group called Dare to Be Great back in the 70s, and they
hmm.
couldn't get a sitter. So they took me to all these sessions, and it was motivation speaking, it was goal setting, and I was like 10, but I was like, this is so cool. And so I've always loved this whole avenue of learning. Um, but in terms of you, what books, podcasts, people, or places would you put on our list? What are some of the ones that motivate you and have inspired you?
Hmm, that's a good question.
Like one of my
Y-
favorite podcasts is Ed Milet. I mean, he's a very
Yeah,
positive guy and a coach and a trainer, and his podcast is amazing.
The Power of One More. Yeah, that's
Oh, one more. I just finished reading that book.
absolutely. There's a lot out there, to be honest with you. There's a lot. It depends on what you need to hear, because I
Yeah.
think that the message is pretty much the same across the board. There's the people who are probably going to be the most, I guess, resonating with you, up to your personality. I love Simon Sinek is great for leadership.
Hmm.
He's one of my favorites. But I would say, I believe his name was John Rome. Did you hear
Mm-mm.
him? No. He was back in the 70s and the 80s, and he was the one who I guess like Tony Robbins supposedly
Yeah.
apprenticed under him.
Ah,
And so he was really the first one who said, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. He kind of had that message
yeah.
where like you need to improve yourself, not improving or changing the circumstances type of thing.
Interesting.
So he was, I would say, like one of the grandfathers of that. And I'm a huge fan of Stoicism. I try to encourage people to be more stoic not in terms of demeanor, but in terms of mindset. And one of the big components, if you listen to the Stoicism podcast, and if you read books, one guy's name's Ryan. I can't remember his last name's escaping me, but he talks about Stoicism as well. And
Huh.
the big thing is to put respect and be kind of proud of yourself for the effort and for the planning, not so much for the outcome. Because a lot of the
Right.
times, like you mentioned, firing the arrow, you
Yeah.
line up the arrow and the wind blows and it moves.
Yeah.
You can't account for that, right? But you should
Right.
take pride in all the effort and the planning that you up to that point, and you
Right.
prepared, set yourself up for success, right?
Yeah.
Because that negative mindset is really not helping you. It hinders a lot of people when you
Oh,
start.
that's my next segue. I didn't have this on
Okay.
your question, but from your perspective,
Yep.
do you think the overall world and the people you interact with have become more positive over the years or more negative? Where's the pendulum, do you think? Do you think people are becoming more positive, or do you think there's just so much negativity? What do you see?
In corporate, I see a mix. Obviously, it's a mix. I would say when people are positive, it's not like outgoingly positive. It's more just it's not
Cautious?
contagious. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not contagious. It's just kind of like an individual thing. But when people are negative, it seems to be much more contagious and kind of, people commiserate more, and people, it starts to spread and starts to share.
Like a cancer, isn't it?
Unfortunately, it is. It
Yeah.
can be like that, and it's not very. You got to nip that in the bud. It's not great to have in an organization, clearly. But yeah, I would tend to think nowadays it's a little bit more negative, unfortunately, and I just think because people are so focused on success and failure. Is it a winner? Is it a lot? Like short term, and
Right.
it's much easier to focus on putting out fires that are right in front of you and doing those things than it is to look at opportunities that might come your way.
Right. Yep. For sure. I love that. So lastly, what brings you joy outside of these topics? What do you do for fun? What's your escape, Ryan?
Well, you
Mentioned golf a few times, so I don't know. Are you a golfer?
I golf on occasion. I golf a handful of times a year, to be honest with you, maybe 4 or 5
Okay.
times. Although when I am in Scottsdale, I do enjoy Top Golf. That
There
is
you
a
go. And
lot of
top
fun.
golf, that's my kind of golf. Because if my ADD kicks in, I'm done. I don't have to finish 7 holes.
That's right.
You
You
know,
take a seat
it's
back down there and you finish your wings,
perfect.
Mark,
Whoever
right? You
came up with
finish.
that concept is brilliant, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I do enjoy doing that, but I'm very much so I'm still I try to be athletic and in team sports. So I play soccer, I play hockey, I do those things.
Good for
Well, I'm a
you.
huge NFL fan, so you really
Really?
touched my heart earlier when you gave the football analogies. I watch almost every game every Sunday and Monday and Thursday, so I really enjoy that. That's kind of the only real break I give myself during the week when
Uh,
because I'm writing books or I'm lecturing or I'm traveling
no, yeah,
so
you're
I don't have a
busy.
lot of time. But my Sundays and Monday night and Thursday night, I'm like, okay, I got to block these off so I can watch these games. I just something about it
Turn
I
the
just
brain
love.
off a little bit and enjoy, right?
Yes, yeah, it's easy. It's amazing how something as easy as turning on a football game really kind of sucks me in, and then other things kind of fade out.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But what's fun about what I love about football and baseball and all sports, but particularly football, is just everything that you've talked about, the motivation factor, teamwork, preparing, all those things. You watch it, you can see a team that's got it in gear and another one that just is, not performing at the level they could be performing at. So I always love that aspect of sports too.
Oh, absolutely. And the metaphors apply to NFL, like to
Yeah,
football, so
so good.
strongly. And I tell, like, a lot of times I'm interviewed and people ask me, they say, why are people so reluctant to coach and this? And one of the examples that I end up bringing up is like Tom Brady. And, since I was young, I liked Brady because I just liked his resilience and his,
Yeah.
you
His
keep your
preparedness.
yeah, exactly. And there was his old mentality was he was all habitual. He said, you keep your motivation, I'll keep my habits because my habits will outlast your motivation. Your motivation wanes, but habits stay.
Yeah.
And he has people don't know this when he was playing. He had 6 coaches, right? He had his head coach, his offensive coordinator, and he had his quarterbacks coach, and then he hired his own personal coaches too. So he
Yeah.
had 6 coaches, and executives and performers in the corporate world, they don't have one, and
So
they look at it like it's a something like it's a detriment. It's like a sign
yeah.
that you can't do it on your own.
Right.
Well, no, maybe it's a sign that you can do even more, and you
Right.
can offload someone with an outside perspective can help you achieve even more, right? Look at the most successful athletes we have.
Yeah. Well, you and I are gonna be talking, Ryan, for sure. So I've been looking for a coach because I just know there's so much more that because you get so what's the word, myopic. You can't see the forest through the
Mhm.
trees sometimes. You're just in this forest and you see it, it's like I said, the zombie effect where you're driving to work every day. You don't even see the houses and cars going by because you do it so automatically. It's just nice to get an awakening of potential and possibilities that you're just not seeing. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm interested in it. And then getting back to Tom Brady, I think it's been really interesting now to listen to him as a commentator.
Yes.
He's so good, isn't he?
He's very good, and I love that you can hear some of his emotion when he's upset
Yeah.
that a quarterback made a decision or something. He really gives it to him. I like that.
Yeah, and his perspective is just so good because he has that full cone of vision and he gives it to you while he's commentating now. And it's like, this is so awesome to hear his perspective on a play.
Yes. And what he's seeing, and he's like, "Oh, look at this
Yeah.
safety creeping here. This tells you
Yeah.
the quarterback knows now." And I'm like, I wouldn't have known that.
I know. It's very cool. So, and there you go. That's a good example of what you do is exactly
That's
that.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so thanks so much for joining us today. I know we went a little over, but I love when I go over because that means we had a good conversation. And what's the best way for our listeners to follow and connect with you?
Oh, it's my pleasure to be on. So for listeners out there, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Ryan J. Warriner, and my last name's Warriner. I'm sure you'll link this in the show notes as
We'll
well.
put in the story notes.
Yeah. Also I'm on Instagram, so you can connect with me there. You can follow me and shoot me a message. My team will relay it to me. I promise. We have a system set up, but if you want to email me, I'll be happy to respond to you. You can just go to me directly. It's Ryan at ryanjwarner.com. All of my information's on my website. And yeah, if I can help you out or help your team get more sales or achieve more success in whatever metric I can, yeah, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to help.
That'd be great. So thank you so much. I look forward when you're in town, please call me. Let's get together.
Absolutely. Like you said, yeah, we'll be talking for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.